All right, let's talk about a word you probably hear all the time, globalization. But what if I told you its real story is way older and way more surprising than you think? That's what we're digging into today.
So, when you hear globalization, what pops into your head? I'm guessing it's stuff like the internet, right? Or maybe those giant container ships crisscrossing the oceans. It feels like a really modern thing, something from the last 50 years or so.
Well, get this. The real story, the one we're going to unpack, starts thousands of years before any of that. And trust me, it's a lot more dramatic. It turns out we've pretty much always been connected in some way.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to jump in our time machine and go way, way back. Thousands of years back, long before the world looked anything like it does today. And, the basic ingredients for what we call globalization, they've been around forever. I mean, look at this. We're talking 3000 BCE. People in the Indus Valley are already trading along the coast with West Asia. Fast forward to the 7th century, and we can actually trace germs spreading over long distances, a pretty wild and kind of dark form of connection. By the 13th century, it's undeniable. The continents are linked.
And this is so important to grasp. These ancient travelers, the traders, the pilgrims, they weren't just carrying stuff like spices or silk. No, they were carrying the very things that build societies. They were moving money, different values, new skills, brand new ideas and inventions, and of course, those invisible passengers we just mentioned, germs and diseases. So all these early threads started weaving together to create these massive, famous networks that literally changed the course of history.
Take the Silk Roads, for example. We've all heard of them, right? But they were so much more than just a way to get fancy goods from A to B. Think of them like a two-way superhighway for culture and economies. You had Chinese silk, pottery, spices from India, all heading west. And what's going back the other way? A whole lot of gold and silver from Europe, flowing east.
And here's the kicker, and it's a rule that holds true throughout history. Wherever goods travel, ideas are sure to follow. It's no accident that these exact same routes that carried silk also became the main arteries for spreading huge, world-changing religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam.
You can even see this story on your dinner plate. I mean, where did spaghetti come from? Seriously. One popular idea is that noodles made the long journey west from China, and over time became the spaghetti we know and love. Or maybe it was Arab traders who introduced pasta to Sicily. We don't know for sure, but either way, it's a delicious example of this ancient exchange.
But the biggest food revolution of all? That came later, after Columbus's voyages. Suddenly you have all these crops from the Americas hitting the Old World for the first time ever. And I'm talking about absolute game changers. Potatoes, corn, tomatoes, chilies. Can you even imagine Italian food without tomatoes? Or Indian food without chilies? It's wild to think they were completely unknown there.
But this new global pantry had a dark side. It created these really deep dependencies. The humble potato, for instance, allowed Europe's poor to thrive. But what happens when you rely so heavily on one thing and it fails? Well, you get a catastrophe, just like the Great Famine in Ireland. That number, 1 million people, that's how many died of starvation. It's a devastating example of how interconnectedness can also mean vulnerability. So all of this is building up to a really dramatic turning point. We're now in the 16th century, and for the people living then, the world was about to feel like it had suddenly shrunk. What does that mean, the world shrank? Well, European sailors finally figured out sea routes to Asia, and in the process, they accidentally stumbled upon the Americas. For the first time in history, you had a network of sea lanes that connected the entire planet. This wasn't just about finding new shortcuts. It was about completely rerouting the flow of everything, goods, people, and wealth, and pointing it all straight towards Europe.
So here's the bottom line. The Americas, which had been basically on their own for thousands and thousands of years, were suddenly thrust into the very center of this massive global shift. All their vast lands, their new crops, their precious metals, it all started to fuel and finance a new era of European expansion.
But this new era of connection wasn't just about silver and potatoes. It came with a terrifying price tag. Because this new global network also unleashed one of the most powerful and destructive weapons in all of human history.
Okay, so when you picture the Spanish conquistadors in the Americas, what do you see? Probably soldiers, right? With steel armor, swords, maybe some of those early clumsy guns. But their deadliest weapon wasn't the guns. It was something they carried with them, something they didn't even know they had.
And it was a weapon you couldn't fight, couldn't capture, and couldn't turn back against them. It was smallpox, the germs they carried. You have to remember, the Americas had been isolated for millennia. The people there had zero immunity to these diseases from Europe. So when smallpox arrived, it was like a biological firestorm. It just tore through communities, wiping out huge portions of the population. An absolutely devastating killer. And this quote, it is absolutely chilling. It's from John Winthrop, a governor in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It shows you that for some of the colonists, this unimaginable death toll wasn't seen as a tragedy. They saw it as God literally clearing the land for them. It's a really stark look into the mindset of the time.
So this violent collision of worlds wasn't just about population changes. It went deeper. It fundamentally rewired the entire global economy.
For centuries, the economic heartbeat of the world was in Asia. China and India were the powerhouses. But everything we've just talked about, the sea routes, the Americas, the disease, it all triggered this massive, permanent shift in who held the economic power.
So what happened? Well, a couple of huge things. At the same time all this was happening, China started to turn inward, kind of pulling back from the world stage. Meanwhile, Europe was doing the opposite. They were using all the resources pouring in from the Americas, resources often extracted from plantations worked by enslaved people from Africa, to turbocharge their own trade and expansion. The whole economic center of the world just tilted dramatically towards the West, and that really set the stage for the world we live in now.
So, when you pull it all together, you realize our global world wasn't just built by the internet and container ships. Its foundations are much older and much more complicated, forged by conquest, by disease, and yeah, even by potatoes. Knowing this true history really changes how you see things today, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, what are the invisible forces, the hidden connections, both good and bad, that are shaping our world right now?